Welcome to Comics in the Making. My name is Ryan Holgerson. I'm the creator of Slackmatic, and I'm joined as always by Levi Erickson, the creator of The Big. Levi, how you doing, man?
Pretty good on this Sunday. We're recording as of recording. This is Sunday, the July something 30th.
It's our earliest recording ever. Instead of drinking beer, we're drinking coffee. At least I'm drinking coffee.
I got this, no sponsor, but if they want to send me a case, DM me Gatorade. It is
Nice.
Coca-Cola. Yeah, DM me. Fast Twitch. You
Yeah.
got me with the name.
We got 59 subscribers, Coke. You need this market.
Yeah, most of them are pretty old too, so they could use the energy boost.
Yeah.
I hope it's Coca-Cola that does Gatorade. Well,
You
that's
know what? No, I think it might be Pepsi.
we're fucked.
Oh shit. Actually, I don't want anything to do with Pepsi, so never mind anyway.
Someone just came in here and took that away from me. So, gonna be
So
learning today.
you had a productive day yesterday.
Oh yeah. Yesterday was the Cartoonist Kayfabe comic book Christmas in July, the second annual, and I participated last year. I was down in Savannah for just good times and dropped some comics in a little lending library on Forsyth, kind of right there in the downtown area around the corner from a comic shop, which I cannot remember the name, and I'm sorry about that. This year, I had prepared and I had little flyers and, why these comic books ended up in those boxes and those libraries and where to find more comics and whose idea it was and where they can find them if they want to learn more about comics, where they can find us. And it was a good day. It was a good day. I, did my part and got a little shout out love from Cartoonist Kayfabe and Ed Piscor himself. So that was pretty dope.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. No, that was great. I love those packages you did. I thought that was really cool. And
Yeah,
I'm glad you showed how you made them.
yeah,
So,
so like on the
your
Instagram
process.
on the Comics in the Making Instagram, you can see, the little photo rundown of how yesterday kind of went down for the Cartoonist Kayfabe comic book Christmas in July. Look forward to doing it again next year.
Hell yeah. All right. So we got that out of the way. Today we are talking about manga. And to be fair,
He's talking about manga.
I'm
I'm
talking
listening.
about manga. And we're talking about manga because Levi asked me to teach him about manga. So I suggest that you ask questions while we go, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can.
Okay. What's a manga? No.
so
Just for
so for
context, yeah, I just through the years just little trickles in. Probably the most mainstream manga crossed in front of my eyes as I was going through different iterations of my interests and whatnot. So now's the time for me to go to someone who really knows a lot about the subject, and that is the guy right over there. And I'm not perspective wise. I mean, you seem like you're on my left, but on the screen, I guess you're still on the left. The guy to my left is going to tell me and you about manga, the art form and
yeah,
the industry and yada yada.
and to just a quick disclaimer, I'm not an expert in manga whatsoever. But I've been collecting it and I've been reading it for about 20 years or so, maybe a little longer when I first saw my first examples of Japanese comics. But I think it's important to talk about manga because manga is what was once one of the most popular comic industries, in just a certain part of the world. Obviously these are Japanese comics, and it's a huge industry over there. But now I think it's easy to say they have taken over the entire world. Um, if you go into any major bookstore, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, you're going to see at least two giant bookshelf rows. And I'm talking about they're like hallway type bookshelves, and it's going to be nothing but manga. And when you go, maybe to the one over to get to the actual, US publishers, it might be one little bookshelf area for their graphic novels, what they call it, where you're going to find some of your image books and your Fantagraphics books and stuff like that. And then they're going to have a bookshelf. And I think this is funny too. Then they'll have a whole bookshelf where it's Marvel and DC. Not one for Marvel, not one for DC. They've got them together. That's how good you're doing, guys. Good job, Big Two. You were into one small bookshelf. So why is manga so popular? So I'll tell you, in my household, we have three people. It's me, my wife, and my daughter. All three of us read manga. And I'll try and set it up and prettify it and send you a picture. But we have a giant bookshelf in our living room, and it's like a cubicle, like IKEA type bookshelf, and it's probably like 7 feet high and like maybe 12 feet wide, and that is our manga bookshelf. And so we have put all of our manga together, and we're real OCD, and we have it in alphabetical order by author, and then alphabetical order by the title for the author and stuff like that. We haven't filled up the bookshelf yet, but we only have one row to go. So we're about to run out. So all three of us read manga, but we do not read the same manga. And that's because manga is so varied in its subject matter and its audience. So when I talk to someone in the US, and I think it's getting better, but for the most part, when I talk to someone in the US and they find out that I write and draw comics, they immediately start talking to me about the MCU or Batman or Superman. That is still the perception of what a comic is in the US. In Japan, I think it's easier to think about it almost like a TV show. If you were to walk up to a random person on the street in Japan and say, "Do you read manga?" they would probably tell you no. But then they would say, "But I do read Slam Dunk," or, "Well, I read One Piece." And so like walking up to someone in the US and saying, "Hey, do you watch TV?" "No, not really, but I do like Game of Thrones and I like Star Trek." It's the industry is that big that no one just is like a fan of manga. And if you are, they consider that like the otaku, which are like super uber nerds. And it's not like in the US where the nerds and the geeks are, well thought of. It's still not like that in Japan. So it's not something that you want to be called. So it's just on that big scale, and so people don't they don't think about it as, oh, I'm reading a comic or whatever. Just like when we watch a TV show, we're not really thinking like, oh, I love TV so much, I love every show that comes out on TV.
Yeah.
But for the US, when we talk about comics, it's still very centered in that big two superhero mentality. Now I do think it's getting better. I think it's getting better and better and better. We with the rise of manga, that is inspiring the new generation of people that are going forward. And I think you see that by just the sheer amount of women getting into the industry. They, a lot of them found manga in the early 2000s and stuff like that, and you can see that influence coming in to the US industry. I know I had heard an interview with someone who ran a sequential art program in college, and he had said when he first started, it was nothing but men, and then at the end of it, before he left, it was almost nothing but women.
Wow.
And so I mentioned that my wife and daughter, they both read manga. So they read more of like what would be called shoujo manga, which is like teen girl manga.
Mhm.
So lots of romance and drama and stuff like that. I know my daughter, I think she reads some like girl love stuff and boy love stuff or whatever, you know. So it's just so varied. Um and it's uh whatever. I lost the word. It's varied, guys.
Yeah,
Um,
like a wide scope, so
very.
um
There
yeah,
is literally, and that's the thing, and we're, back in the 2000s when manga really started growing here in the US, all we were getting was essentially manga's version of the big two. We were getting Shonen Jump stuff. So we were getting Dragon Ball, and
yeah,
we started getting One Piece, we were getting Naruto, Shaman King, stuff like that. And that is their shonen manga, and that's for like teen boys. And so I think in the early 2000s, people's impression of what manga was that it was all these people fighting
mhm,
and getting powers and stuff like that, and crazy hair and big eyes and
yeah,
bigger boobs, and and so it that was their impression. But as the industry went on and they kept saying, hey, this keeps selling, then they started going, well, let's try another audience. And then they started releasing some of their shoujo stuff. And
yeah,
then that started going really good. And honestly, I think if you go look in those Books a Million stores and stuff like that, predominantly a lot of the material is going to be for girls. Um, so,
yeah.
and honestly, our bookshelf, I don't have a huge manga collection. It's almost all my wife and daughter. And my wife actually, she purged her collection. Oh, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know. And she, at that point, had over 500 volumes.
Wow.
Um, and we had given them to a local bookstore or whatever.
Now,
We
when you say a volume, what does that look like compared to, if I'm picturing a volume of collected like Walking Dead or, a Marvel storyline, I'm picturing something in the 80 something page count, kind of book bound.
So, the closest one to a standard one that I have right in front of me is this right here,
Mhm.
and this is, oh, there's so much full bleed. It's about 190 pages,
Oh wow.
so
Okay.
close
Yeah.
to 200 pages,
Yep.
and that's pretty standard for just about every. They call them tankobons, although technically they're not tankobons what we get here, but we don't have to go that in depth.
No.
But
Yeah.
the collections and stuff like that, on average, like if you're picking up like a One Piece volume, or a Dragon Ball volume, they're going to be about 180 pages,
Hmm.
um, for a volume, and they release about I think 3 to 4 of those a year.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you break that down, that's a similar production rate, for what we're used to for a monthly floppy.
Oh, no, 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 no,
No.
no, 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 no.
Because I can't
So
do math.
they do in a week. They do in a week.
Oh shit.
They do a monthly floppy in a week.
Gotcha.
So that'll be a good segue. So let's talk about how the industry actually works over there. Um, so they don't release what we would think of as floppies
Mhm.
in Japan. What they do is they release these giant magazines, and I wish I had some. I used to have some. I don't have any. Um, but they release these giant magazines either every week, every other week, every month. It just depends on that title, that company, whatever. There's all sorts of different ones. But the big monster over there is like Shonen Jump. And that's for like teen boys and stuff like that. So that's where you're gonna find One Piece, you're gonna find Spy Family, Demon Slayer was in there, Dragon Ball used
Mhm.
to be in there. That was the big title in there. Well, actually Dragon Ball's in there again because I think there's a sequel. Um, so they release, for Shonen Jump, for example, they release that every week. And within that magazine, you're going to get whatever 10, 15, 20 different titles. So these manga artists, and I'm going to say mangaka from time
Okay.
to time. Mangaka is just someone who creates manga. They're the author. Um, and so they will release a chapter every single week in that magazine. And that chapter is going to be anywhere from like 18 to 20 pages long.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're talking what a standard floppy is 22 pages. They do that in almost a week. So they do 4 times the amount of work than a standard, you know, big two team would.
Right.
Um so uh so they release those in there. Now if they're big enough, and again, think about this like a TV show. Uh so they'll have mailers in the magazines. And I'm assuming at this point you can go online or whatever, but they'll have mailers in the magazines where the readers will fill out surveys and send them in and tell them like what's their favorite story and manga in that issue. And the editors and the publisher and stuff, that's where they'll base like, well, you might get canceled, or maybe you'll move up, like I
Mhm.
think that top spot in the magazine, that's kind of like, that's the best, that's where you want to be.
Right.
um and they'll move you up based on that. So it would just be like a time slot, which this is kind of dating us because no one uses time slots anymore because it's all
Right.
streamed. But back in the day, it would have been like a time slot, you know. So are you TGIF, or are you that NBC Thursday?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Are you opposite
yeah,
Monday Night Football?
right. So so that's where they go now. Now, if they're popular enough, though, that's when they get collected into the tankobons, and the tankobons are the collections.
The phone books.
Right.
Dating ourselves
Now,
again.
right. So I think it's a big myth. Well, it's not a myth, but a lot of people talk about manga, and especially artists, they always mention assistants. Well, they have lots of assistants. That's how they get all this stuff done. It's because they've got an entire army of people, drawing their backgrounds and doing their zipatones, doing all their shading and stuff like that. And that's true to a point. But what I don't think a lot of people realize is when you're starting out in that industry, they don't pay you a whole lot, and
Mm.
they probably pay you pretty close to what a cartoonist in America would be making.
Mm.
So, and the real money doesn't come until you get those tankobons printed.
Oh, I see.
And so another big difference between Japan and the US is in Japan, you might be published by Kodansha, which, is one of the, Kodansha and Shueisha are the two major players over there. That's their big two. And they're one of the biggest I mean, they might be the biggest publishers in the world. They're huge, and these guys are printing comics in the millions, millions. Um, but they don't own those characters. The mangaka still retains the rights to their work.
Interesting.
So Kodansha or Shueisha or whoever, they'll print them in those magazines. Then when it goes to Tankobon, now they might print those Tankobons also. Um and of course they'll get like a royalty cut from that. So that's when the quote unquote real money starts coming in for them. So you can actually see, if you look at the first few volumes of like a brand new manga artist, you can see it's usually around the second or third volume when the backgrounds and stuff start leveling up a little bit, because that's when the money started coming in to where they were able to get an assistant. So a
Gotcha.
lot of them, when they start off, they're doing those 18 pages by themselves every single week. I read one interview. I mean, there have been a few Western people that have gone over there to do manga, and I think one or two lasted a little bit. And the one guy, and I can't remember his name, but he had said, he could only afford an assistant like 1.5 days a week.
Oh wow.
He'd come in and he would try and have stuff ready to go for him and be like, all right, do this, and this. Um, but these guys sleep maybe 3 hours a day if they're lucky. I mean, you can find it on online. I saw like an Excel calendar for Oda, who is the guy who does One Piece, of his schedule. Now, keep in mind, this guy's multimillionaire. You know, it is by far the most selling series in history.
Wow.
I mean, it's probably up there with the Bible. I mean,
Damn.
this guy's last printing for volume like 105 of One Piece. I mean, they start the printing at like 3.5 million, and that's just the first printing. Okay, it's gonna go back to
I'm
print.
I'm just thinking like, the difference between I mean it's apples and oranges. I mean 100%, but like, you
But
know,
what's crazy to me is what does that say about our literacy in this
yeah,
country?
yeah, yeah, and comics are a visual medium, at
Yeah,
the heart. So we're not talking, classic
yeah,
literature either. So
right, right. So, but anyway, so this is a guy who, if he wanted to, he could afford to have 1 million assistants, and I don't know how many assistants he has. I know he has them. He definitely works with them, but he still demands that he inks, he draws and inks everything that moves on that page. And
Gotcha.
if you've ever seen a manga page, that can be most of the page.
Yep.
Um, so this guy, I think the most sleep he got in a day was like 6 hours, and it was all scheduled out. I mean, it was like, do this from this, sleep from this time to this time, work on the story this day and this day. And that's the thing, they work on their stories probably like 2 to 3 days out of a 7-day week, trying to get the layouts and everything right. They work with an editor. Again, think of it like a big TV production. They have an editor who's highly involved in all of this. And so they're going through, well, maybe change this, maybe change that, having these extremely late night meetings, maybe getting an hour of sleep, coming right back, doing it again. I mean, I feel bad for the editors. I mean, because these guys might have multiple series,
Oh yeah.
that they're working on. But yeah, I think it like 6 hours was like the max in a week that he got in a day. And the guy's married and has 2 kids. I think now they do all their stuff from his house. I think he has a studio there. But when I read about him first, he lived in Tokyo. That's where his studio was. His house was
Mhm.
outside Tokyo, and his wife and 2 kids would come visit him one day a week for 2 hours a day.
Wow.
So, you know, again, Japan is a completely different culture from
No,
what
yeah, yeah.
Westerners are used to. And to be honest, the work culture there is like, I mean, we think we have it bad. Oh my
Hmm.
God. I would never. I'm fascinated by Japan.
Yep.
I think it's a beautiful culture. I love their art. I would never in a million years work and live there. Never. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I've been to, Japan,
Yeah.
Okinawa three
Right.
times, and got to visit the mainland a few
Yeah.
times during that. So,
Which they
but
don't consider themselves Japanese, Okinawans.
yeah,
Yeah.
so for my experience, I was really looking for records. I was looking going to the record stores, the
Yeah.
music stores, and I got some cool, you know, Japanese punk rock that I don't know if it ever made it to the States, but I wasn't really paying much
And I
attention
love
to the
Shonen Knife.
comics. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, there was this band Laughing Nose. I just caught the CD cover behind the counter. It was just, you know, punks and leathers and spikes and just
Yeah.
doing what punks do. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, can I, please? And the guy, kind of looked at me, okay, if you want that, dude. And I love
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess they're still going Laughing Nose. It's just hardcore punk Japanese, but I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention to comics too much in those days. So I probably walked past I I I walked past, just troves of stuff. If I would have taken a moment and just glanced over, I would have found something interesting. I just wasn't looking at the time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, my first experience with manga was I think I found a book in the library that we went to, and I think it was Manga. Cartoonist Kayfabe interviewed him years ago.
Mhm. I
Is
remember that one.
Fred Schrodinger, I think his name, or something like that. You guys can correct me. But I think that was the first time I saw it, and I remember being blown away. Um, because it just looks so different
Hmm.
than American comics. And I loved American comics, but like I have more of a cartoony style, and I still
Right.
really gravitate towards I've mentioned like Bone was one of my favorite. That just, blew my mind when it came out. And manga is similar it's not always that way, but what I was looking at in that book were a lot of really cartoony type characters
Hmm.
in this comic book, and I was like, oh my god, that's kind of what I want to do. um so and but at that time you couldn't find anything uh in America.
No, yeah,
Maybe
and I remember when.
maybe I'm trying to remember, maybe Lone Wolf and Cub had started coming out,
Hmm.
and maybe
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's it. I mean, but I do remember like in the mid to late 90s you started seeing like Ranma by Rumiko Takahashi, which was a really fun series, and then like Ghost in the Shell, and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
No,
Oh,
I
and
remember.
Akira,
Well, Akira, yeah. I was gonna say, like, I'm trying to think about when Akira was first that I encountered it published. I'd seen it animated.
yeah,
I think the animated feature was like 88 or 87 or something like that.
right. And it was, I
Um,
mean, well, and we're gonna talk about Atomo. Uh, I've got it over here, but uh, yeah, no, but I mean, even the color version of it coming out from Epic was almost, I mean, by the end of it was coming out in almost real time.
okay.
Um, I think it was only maybe a few months after it was ending in Japan or whatever that last like epic color version came out. Um, which I have a few of those.
Hmm.
I prefer the black and white.
Yeah, I've got volume one published by Dark Horse, I think in
Black and
1991,
chocolate.
black and white.
Mhm.
It's upstairs in my daughter's room.
Yeah,
And hopefully she's perusing that as she
yeah,
as she can,
yeah. So
getting
uh
influence.
so as we're talking about assistants and stuff like that and kind of how they work, um for anybody who's a cartoonist, I would 100% recommend a TV show called Man Ben. And this is a Japanese TV show. Again, let's think about the TV show about manga.
Oh, dude.
That's what this industry, that's how big this industry is, okay? Now I don't know how popular this TV show actually is in Japan, but I mean they've got, I think, 15 episodes. They do for really short seasons over there. So it'll be like 3 or 4 episode seasons. Um so this show is hosted by Naoki Urasawa, who is a mangaka. Comic Tropes said that he considers him maybe the greatest living cartoonist on the planet. Um, I haven't read a lot of Urasawa stuff. I need to. But he's most well known for like 20th Century Boys.
Mhm.
The book I really want to read is Pluto. The series is Pluto from him. But he's super famous over there. I mean, he's famous over here. So what they do is they put cameras in mangaka studios all over there, and they leave them there for like 3 days to 5 days to a week. And
It's like
then
Big Brother
yeah,
manga edition.
yeah. And then after they've gotten that footage and they've edited it down and stuff like that, Urasawa and the mangaka will meet at like a certain location, like a bar or whatever. It's kind of up to the person that's being profiled.
Yeah.
They meet there and they do like play by plays of
Oh,
them drawing.
okay.
if you're I don't even care if you're into manga. If you're an artist, if you draw comics and you don't want to watch these guys nerd out and talk about what pen did you use, like I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, it is like
Yeah.
it's so fucking awesome. It's so informative. I've learned so much watching that show, just seeing what they do. Um, whether even, traditional tools, digital tools,
Mhm.
a mixture of both. The Ino Asano episode is just, oh my God. He he works in this mixture of both digital and traditional. And he'll go and take these reference photos and then print them out and then draw on top of those reference photos to
Oh,
make
cool.
them his own. So it's not even like we talk about like tracing and making it your own and stuff like that. He actually goes in there and draws right over it, And that's the thing, these guys are having to draw super fast.
Right.
Um, and this guy only had two assistants. And that's the thing. So for people that are like, oh, they've got assistants, go watch these episodes. One, you'll see that they don't all have assistants.
Mhm.
And two, you'll see that even when they have them, it's still a huge amount of work. One of the first episodes they have, I forget her name, but she was doing what they're working on when they're filming her was a monthly manga. Now we say, oh, cool, she's got an easier time because it's monthly. No, when they do a monthly one, then they're putting out like 50, 60 pages or
Yeah, I was
something
gonna
like that.
say, yeah,
So
that's
it's no easier.
yeah.
He had like her staff comes into her studio and it's like an army. I mean, it's like 10 people and they've got to finish this thing up. She's not taking any breaks. She's sitting there at the desk and she's got nonstop people coming up to her going, how about this? How about this? How about
Mhm.
this? They'll bring it up and they'll be like, how's this look? And she'll take it and she goes, I'll fix it. She'll white it all out and she'll redraw it. Um, so it's a ton of work. Now what I will say is I really wish there was more credit going to those assistants. Most of the manga you see goes completely uncredited for the assistants.
Well, it's kind of that way here too, isn't it?
It is.
You
It
know,
is.
for
Um,
I guess whatever reason, but when we hear about similar stories of American creators that we're familiar with, and then years later, even they say, "Oh, I pretty much just inked the faces. I did the
yeah,
layouts, inked the faces, and everyone else did everything else." And it's like,
yeah, yeah,
do run your studio the way you run it, but I would feel a little bit,
yeah.
you could have put a name in
I
there
would.
on the
I wouldn't feel. I
info.
wouldn't feel right about it. I wouldn't feel right about it. I don't see what's so hard about it. About saying they did, and it's still, and we're going to go through some of these here in the next segment of the stuff I'm recommending, and you'll see that it doesn't matter if they have assistants; it's still beautiful work,
Oh
But
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. It's no,
give them some credit.
yeah,
Honestly, to date, I can only think, and I'm sure there's more, but I remember my wife used to read, and I would flip through it. Um, a mangaka named Ken Akamatsu, and he did a series called Love Hina and Nagima. He's actually a politician now in Japan,
oh wow,
but he would give his assistants credit. You would get to the back of the book and it'd be his name and then it'd be like 10 other names. And I always thought that was really cool that he actually was like, um, giving them some love because
oh
they
yeah,
deserve,
for
you know.
sure, without a doubt.
So I'm gonna go through a bunch of my favorites mangas. Um, Again, I don't read a huge amount of manga. Um, but and for me, I'm always just looking for comics. I'm just
Yeah,
looking for different comics. And I mean, and like we just said, what's the easiest kind of comic to find right now? It's manga.
right.
So that's a lot of the reason where like, I'll gravitate towards manga because it's the easiest thing for me to find. Um, like if I'm just in a, regular bookstore or whatever.
Hmm.
So, so first up, I shot this on the screen a little bit ago. This is called Rooster Fighter. Um, and it's by Shu Sakuratani. I'm unfamiliar with his mangaka. From what I understand, he's done other stuff. This is probably one of the more mainstream mangas that I have. Um, and I was drawn to it because it's a rooster that fights giant demons, like giant kaiju demons.
Yeah.
And it's really like a satire of like fighting kaiju like manga and stuff like that. It's fucking hilarious. And it's drawn in this real, I mean, what I would consider like hyper realistic style. Um, so
Oh damn.
really,
Yeah, and
looks
that
like a
that kind of
chicken.
that little that little screenshot you gave us just or the little preview you gave us for what it's worth. When I think manga, that's I'm not expecting that kind of rendering
Oh,
usually.
oh no. I mean, and check out that monster that he's fighting. So it's like these giant demons that he's fighting, and they're kind of putting in like a backstory, like you're not sure what's going on and stuff like that. Um, and but it really just seems like an excuse for this guy to draw just fucking awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to find something. I don't know if I'm gonna find it, but like,
Well, if you want to
so,
reference a page or something, I'll see if I can source like
yeah.
an
Well,
image
well,
capture
so
somewhere.
so this book has, it really plays on the whole like he's a rooster thing. And it's kind of like a wandering like Ronin sort of
Yeah.
thing where he wanders from place to place. But he'll like stop at these hen houses, and he always has these trysts with like these other chickens and stuff. And so it shows a bunch of like chicken sex and stuff like that. It's just it's just crazy. It's off the wall. So like this is by far not what I would like number one recommend for a manga. But I thought it was a fun mention to just like show right off the bat. Like it's just I love it.
Chicken sex.
Dude, oh my god. It's so fun. It's like, how much stuff could he put in here that if it were people it'd be like this would be a porn, and but they're chickens.
Feathers flying.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So here's a panel of him fucking this chick. So yeah.
Oh God. Okay.
Where are you gonna find that in American
Oh.
Show? Tell me where you're gonna
Oh
find
my. Oh shit. I'm gonna have to switch to beer.
it. All right. So the next guy that I wanted to mention, now in the US, this is probably one of the most popular mangaka going right now. But this is Junji Ito, and Junji Ito is a horror mangaka, and so he does a lot of it. I mean, it's
In
almost all of his
contrast to what
stuff.
you just showed us.
Yes, very much so. Um, but I mean, I will say though, there's still a lot of humor in his work, and especially the book that I'm going to show off. Um, but I first discovered Junji Ito back in the early 2000s, late 90s. So Viz at the time was they were actually publishing like Shonen Jump in American magazines. And you could find it in grocery stores and stuff like that. And they were doing like Shoujo Beat also, which was more their girl manga and stuff like that. And for about a year, they tried to get into so it's called Gekiga. I don't know. I'm learning Japanese, but I still, not perfect. And those are more like adult comics, more weird what we would think of as, Fantagraphics comics and drawn and quarterly comics and stuff like that.
In contrast to the rooster
Yeah.
sex.
And so they were publishing this magazine called Pulp, which was all the weird stuff. And at the time, they were serializing Uzumaki, which is one of Junji Ito's most famous series. And it's about a town that is cursed by spirals. And that doesn't sound scary, but oh my God, when I first saw his work in pulp, it was just there was something unsettling about it. Like just the way he drew these horrific images and stuff like that. And as horrified as I was also like, I gotta find more of this guy's stuff. And he's such an amazing artist. He has an episode on Man Bin. It's I mean, because I'm such a fan of his, um, you know, that's probably my favorite episode of Man Bin. He does not work with assistants. And in fact, the most he works with an assistant from what he said, and I think this is different now, um, was sometimes he would have his neighbors do black spots, and that was it. And but I think maybe his schedule's still super rigorous, but I think it's a little different because he does more short form series and short stories and stuff like that, which is why I think I'm also drawn to his stories. Because we didn't really talk about this. I'll throw it in. A big difference between manga and the US is manga is super based on they care about the characters. They
Mm,
want to know where the characters are going. What's their arc? So if you we'll just say like My Hero Academia, which is super popular
yeah,
anime and manga. This is a story about this kid, going to school to become a superhero and how's he going to become the best superhero.
right.
Well, we have those characters in the US too, and stuff like that, but our comics, at least when you think about like the Silver Age and stuff like that and going back, it's very sitcom
Hmm.
because you would get that issue and Batman or Spider-Man might go through something, but at the end of the issue, he's Spider-Man again.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you
You
get the
almost leave
next
them where you picked them up.
right. I mean, it's like the Jim Shooter thing. Everybody's comic might be their first comic. So, you pick those up and you kind of know exactly where you're going. In manga, it's all about this journey for whatever the
Hmm.
character is. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that stuff. I'm not big into any of that kind of shonen kind of stuff. And it's for teen boys, and I'm not a teen boy. Um, but Junji Ito's work, because it's more short, um, it's more plot based. It's really not about like where's this character going and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, and so the book I wanted to show off, although I mentioned Uzumaki and I love Uzumaki, it's amazing, but I wanted to mention Gyo. And Gyo is about a this couple. They go to like an island on vacation, and these fish start walking out of the sea on these like artificial legs. And um and and it just goes off the rails from there. There's a mad scientist, which is probably why I really like it too. I love me some mad scientists. Um and by the end of it, this whole thing is like taken over the entire city, and it's just devolved into madness. But it's probably one of his more humorous works. I don't want to give a lot away, but pretty much the entire almost 400-page book is a giant fart joke. Um, but there's a lot of body horror in this, and I'm trying to okay, so here's an example of some of his work. And I mean, it's just oh my god, what he does with black and white
Hmm.
is is just amazing. Um, all of his stuff is great. I have almost all of his books. Um, they're really weird. Um, they are horror, but a lot of them are just like I don't know. They're just weird, man. I don't know how to describe it other than weird. Um, and somehow he makes it work. Now he's had a few anime adaptations, and like he just had one on Netflix that came out either I think it was the beginning of this year or late last year. Um, and it just didn't work. And what's funny is they're actually really faithful adaptations to his work. And I think that's when you realize like some stories work in a comic form
Yeah.
that don't work in like a live action or anime form, because I mean they kind of kept the, the dialogue was the same, the story was the same, but
Mm.
something about watching something on the TV where you're like, why the fuck would you do that,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't make sense. But in the comic, I think there's a certain amount of disbelief you can get away with, and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. 100%.
But love his comics. I never in a million years thought when I found him in Pulp magazine that now you would go into a bookstore and he would have entire kiosks devoted to him. I mean, he's huge here. I mean, I was in Walmart the other day and they had a Uzumaki Junji Ito coloring book in Walmart. I
Wow.
mean, so he's huge here, and the punk rocker in me wants to be like, oh, he's too big. But man, I love his stuff so much. I'm so glad he's as big as he is. So
Yeah.
we get all of this stuff translated and get it over here.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Oh, you know what? All right. Okay, so I mentioned Pulp magazine. So I found Junji Ito in that, and then there was another artist named Junko Mizuno. And I also discovered her in Pulp magazine. And this is
Okay.
the book I'm going to show off. This is Pure Trance, and it's published by Last Gasp. So if you know anything about Last Gasp, you know it's going to be pretty weird and probably fucked up. Last Gasp is a San Francisco publisher, and they're most known for printing and distributing like underground comics and stuff like that. Like, so I mean, right, I think they hold all the printing and stuff for like Zap Comics, like old R Crumb comics and stuff like that right
Yeah.
now. Um, I'm showing this Pure Trance book off because it's one of the more widely available of hers. My favorite work of hers is actually she did a series of 3 fairy tales. She did like Cinderella, Hansel and Gretel, and Little Mermaid. But they're like way out of print and they're hard to find. I just got this hardcover version of Pure Trance from Last Gasp just a few weeks ago. I used to have a soft cover and it was all fucked up, and they had this hardcover and they were having a sale, so I was like, hell yeah.
Cool.
But she's got I mean, she has like a cute style, but it's still disturbing and kind of horrific. Um, and I don't think I realized how much of an influence she's kind of had on my work, because I have a lot of mixture of that's cute
Mhm.
and also that's horrific and stuff like that. And I like to mix the two. Um, but yeah, I mean, she's got like a real almost like uh what would be considered like kawaii style, which is cute. Um, and now she actually lives in the US now, in the San Francisco area, I believe, but she's more known as a fine artist now. So now she does a lot of painting, and design work and stuff like that. But I love her style, just this mixture of cute and horror. But Pure Trance, I mean, this book is just beautiful with like the hardcover, and it's got like the gold emboss and everything, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, I love it. And and if you can find those fairy tale books, I highly recommend those. They were printed on this like pretty cheap newsprint, but they're in color. And she writes that she was trying to go for like a American comic book
Oh
kind
wow.
of aesthetic or whatever. So they're pretty cool. And then she has another series called Pelu, which I have, which are more adult comics. Um, it's about an alien gigolo. Um, and they're pretty weird, but I do like them. But the Pure Trance stuff's really cool, and the Pure Trance stuff is cool because it's she actually did them for like CD booklets. It was for like a music company in Japan, and they were doing like a promotional thing, and so she did all these CD booklet sized comics for them. And and then they added a bunch of like stuff in this book to get it to more of like a regular format. And so there's a bunch of stuff at the bottom where she kind of goes more in depth into that world and stuff like
Oh,
that.
okay. I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. All right, so next let's talk about the god of manga, who is Asama Tezuka. So Asama Tezuka is, in his lifetime, he produced over, I think, 100,000 pages of manga.
Wow.
He pretty much single-handedly almost created the industry. He did single-handedly create the anime industry. There was no real animation industry in Japan until him.
Yeah.
Um, and he was really, his most famous creation is Astro Boy,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was even in syndication here in America and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But he was really inspired by Disney. And what's really cool about that is because he was so inspired by Disney, he really liked, like the big cartoon eyes that they would do like on the Seven Dwarves and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he incorporated that into his art, and so you get these
Yeah.
what we think of as manga eyes,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
And then
then
that got
other right, it's just a giant circle,
yeah,
so
yeah. And that
he
that came to us in the late 90s, and all of a sudden you got
right,
like Adam Warren and Joe
right,
Herrera, J. Scott Campbell incorporating
exactly.
those elements
Yeah.
into what they're doing.
Yeah, so it's like it's this, and when he started doing it, of course, he was getting so popular in Japan that other mangaka that were, just starting out, because this was a new industry there, they're kind of, ripping him off, and they're doing those big manga eyes and stuff. And now that's just like a mainstay there. Now, I mean, honestly, I don't really like the big eye thing. Um, uh, I use it to a certain amount in my work, but I think it's a little different. But that's not what really speaks to me when I look at manga or whatever.
Mhm.
But it's become so ingrained in their culture and their art style and stuff like that. Um, Now I used to have Dark Horse put out the entire run of Astro Boy, and I used to have the entire run. It was like 42 books. But I mentioned my wife purged a lot of her collection, so did I.
Mhm.
I still have some of the Astro Boys. But the book I wanted to showcase is his Phoenix books. And this is actually like an entire saga that he worked on through his lifetime. And let's see, I think there's a thing. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, like 13 books in his Phoenix saga. And essentially what it was a journey through like time and space. And but they all have this interlocking like Phoenix around the story somehow.
Okay.
But he would do ones that were more like based in feudal Japan. He would have them in some that were futuristic and based in
Yeah.
space, and they were all over the place. But they're really cool, sci-fi stories. And that's my favorite stuff of his work. I mean, he did everything. I mean, he did the first girl comics with Princess Knight. He did the first boy comics, but
Mhm.
the stuff that I always liked was his more sci-fi stuff, like Astro Boy. I really liked Astro Boy. And I like the Phoenix a lot too. But he's got, I mean, his style is just so simple and cartoony. And you get, I mean, and this guy was doing, I don't know, he was doing several series at a time. I mean, I think God knows how many pages he was producing on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
I'm sure that information's out there. It's also probably why he died at age 60 something. And I think that's something important to talk about. We're actually going to talk about it now as I introduce this other artist. But a lot of mangaka don't live a long time, and we talked about their work schedule. And when you're sitting down and you're working on this stuff for literally maybe 20 hours a day, you're not doing much else.
Yep.
And so that stuff wreaks havoc on your body. So the next mangaka that I want to talk about is Shigeru Mizuki, and his most well-known creation is Kitaro,
Mm-hmm.
and he created a yokai manga. And yokai are they're like Japanese spirits, and they have like 1,000 of them, thousands of them. I mean, they have a yokai for everything. Um, and so Kitaro was this character that would kind of get he I think he's like half yokai, half human or whatever, if I remember right. And he gets into all these adventures with all these other yokai. Um, and I love his work. It's it's got that combination of like
Yeah.
super cartoony, but then insanely realistic backgrounds. And I'm sure he's working with an assistant and stuff like that, and I don't give a shit. But I mean, it's just like this spread here, you know,
Oh yeah.
just like insanely cartoony character, but then this like highly rendered ocean or waterfall or whatever's going on here, you know. But Shigeru, his life is fascinating. So this guy um was drafted into the army in World War II and was sent to the islands to fight. He actually has a manga memoir about this called Onwards Toward Our Noble Death. And he was super critical of the Japanese government.
Yeah.
I don't think he was actually saying that. But so in I think the first battle he had to go into, a bomb landed quite close to him, and I think only maybe 3 or 4 people survived out of his battalion. He lost his dominant arm in that blast, and he was an artist before that. That was his main love. Um, but and he was actually cared for by the locals. They found him and nursed him back to health, and then I guess eventually the Japanese army found him. He's lucky he wasn't executed. Um, and but when he got back to Japan, eventually, and it's a long story, we're not going to go into it, but eventually, he started finding ways to draw again with his left arm. And so all the manga that you see from him, he drew with his non-dominant arm.
Wow.
The other thing that he was super vocal about was the manga schedule, like I just said.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived to be into his 90s. He only died a few years ago.
Oh wow.
He's actually they had a TV show about him too, as like a reality show, like him and his wife. Um, there's like his hometown has like his characters like statues like all over it, like the Kitaro statues and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was always super vocal, and I'd read in some interviews where he just mentioned how dreadful he thought the manga schedule was on the artist, and how it was ridiculous and it was killing his friends. And he was like going through, like Osamu Tezuka, they would have been contemporaries at the time. um and saying, it's, you got to live your life. So he still has a huge amount of work. There's a ton of Kataro books. I mentioned the Onwards Towards Our Noble Death. He also did a series called Showa, which is more history based about Japan. Um, but my favorite Mizuki work is Nonnanba. Um, and this is also a memoir, but this is of his time when he was a child living in a small village.
Mm-hmm.
And this character Nonnanba was like a grandmother to him. It wasn't his actual grandmother, but she was like an older woman that lived in the village. And what's cool about it is she's the one that taught him about yokai. So
Yeah.
it was this experience that then brought him to his most famous creation with Kitaro. But I love this memoir because he still he intersperses the yokai legends into a memoir. So
Yeah.
you'll have actual, stories that happened to him when he was living there. But then you'll have it interspersed with these drawings of like monsters and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to I know there's some really good ones. We'll try and throw them on the screen. I was getting a list together for you.
Yeah.
But again, I love the like cartoony drawing with the like super detailed backgrounds and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I like I said, I'm sure he had an assistant. I don't know where that division of labor is because I've looked because especially for someone who draws with their non-dominant arm, I'm like, oh man, I want to know, like, was he doing all these backgrounds? Like, I gotta know everything about him, you
No,
know.
yeah, and you know, in many ways, you would think that that juxtaposition would be a little distracting. Having to like ways to render spread so far apart. But I've seen some of that stuff, and I've seen that sort of technique or that balance put into some other works, and I think if it's done right, it does achieve a good balance with the
Yeah,
real simple main character, hyper detailed background.
yeah,
I don't think it
yeah,
works the other way around. If you want to have
yeah.
a highly
No, it
rendered
doesn't. It
subject
doesn't.
in a shitty,
Yeah.
we've seen, we lived through the 90s. We've seen a lot of comics with highly rendered subjects and shitty backgrounds, and it just doesn't work.
I wonder if it's because of our um I wonder if it still goes back to like Disney animation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, if you look at an animated movie, you know, a lot of times you're going to have those, you know, more simple cartoony characters, and a lot of
Hmm.
that's just because it makes the animation process easier.
Right.
But you know, you look at the backgrounds and they're like incredibly highly rendered, and you know,
Hmm.
they're paintings. You know, a lot of, for the classic ones. You know, so I wonder if that's just our we're so used to seeing that when we see, you know, it the other way around, it wouldn't work. But I don't think it would work. I think you're right. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
like I say, there's a lot of 90s comics,
yeah,
superhero, American superhero comics that,
yeah.
highly rendered
I
subjects.
mean,
But
the one that comes to mind for me is would be Cerebus. You know, Sarah, you know,
Mhm.
and those characters are detailed and stuff like that, but they're definitely in a more stylized, cartoony style. But
Right.
Gearhardt's backgrounds and Cerebus are fucking next level,
Yeah.
just amazing. Um,
Yep.
So next one I wanted to mention, this is another super famous mangaka. Well, he's not a mangaka, he's known as a director. And that's Hayao Miyazaki. Um who is, you know, this is the most famous director from Studio Ghibli.
Hmm.
Um you know, he did you know, My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away. He just in Japan they just released his last movie. He keeps saying it's his last movie, like every movie. He's like, I'm retiring. He's like the grumpiest old man in the world. But uh there's a lot of good memes about that. You should look him up. It's actually between him and Junji Ito, where they kind of, you know, their art is so different and then their personalities are so different. Like Junji Ito is pretty laid back, funny guy, and
Yeah.
you know, Hayao Miyazaki's grumpy old man. But yeah, I just wanted to point out his Nausicaa book. This is pretty much the only mangaka he's done. He did do a movie about this, but it's a 2 volume set. What I think is really really cool about it, one is his artwork's beautiful, and it's super detailed and stuff. But what I think is great, like these pages, you know, a lot of manga pages are like maybe 2 to 3 panels. This guy fits 5 to 6 tiers on these pages, and it's to me it's way more European
Yeah.
than you know. And I mean, I think him and Mobius, you know, I believe him and Mobius knew each other, or yeah. um and but uh what I like about it is because he's putting all those tiers on there and they're these really skinny panels and stuff like that, you can see that influence in his storyboards and stuff like that. So it's almost
Yeah.
like it's a storyboard for his movie. Um, but if you've seen the movie, the manga is really good too. It's way more detailed. Like I said, it's like 2 volumes, and the movie's like, you know, hour and a half long or something like that. So now this next guy, this is another Last Gasp book.
Oh, cool.
Um, this is Heaven's Door, and this is by Kichi Koike. And they're these like I love this color spread at the
Oh,
beginning,
yeah.
and then it like opens up. See that? It's pretty cool. Um, but these are a bunch of short stories. And again, I think these have a lot of European influence, more than manga. I mean, you see a lot of kind of like that clear line style you would
Mhm.
see in European comics. Um, but this is easily accessible. Like I said, it's published by Last Gasp. I got it when they were having that big sale. I got it along with Pure Trance.
Yeah.
Um, and like a lot of weird sci-fi stories. The reason he was brought to my attention though is because he was an assistant for Katsuhiro Otomo.
Okay.
Now, Otomo is someone who's never given his assistants credit, and he still says that he did everything himself. Um, that I guess he can do that. But so we mentioned it earlier. My last book is going to be Akira.
Yeah.
This is just the first. I've got the entire set. I I so you can get this several ways. So Levi mentioned the Dark Horse one that you've got.
Yep.
I used to have all those too, and they got ruined. So
Mm.
I was lucky enough to get a good deal, and I bought the Kodansha box set last year.
Cool.
And that comes with all 6 volumes, and they're all hardcover. And then it comes with a 7th book, with uh, yeah, with just a bunch of ancillary material and stuff like that, like the production schedule and stuff like that.
Okay, cool.
And oh man, look at that spread, look at that helicopter.
Yeah, yeah. See, I love shit like that. And I know for a fact, if nothing else, a lot of American 90s comics pulled direct reference from so
Oh,
much of this manga,
there's so much.
without a
I
doubt.
mean, they taught McFarlane just ripped
Yeah,
straight. I mean,
like
straight
side by
out of
side,
Mc.
like,
Yeah, yeah. If you haven't read Akira, and a lot, the anime is and that's the thing. Otomo directed the anime
yeah.
while he was finishing this manga. He's doing both. These guys, I don't know how they fucking do it.
Right.
Um, the anime is great, and the anime is still going to live in, go down in history. For people that don't know, the reason that anime still holds up, not only is an interesting story and stuff like
Mm.
that, but it was shot at 24 frames, and most animation is shot at 12 frames.
Yeah.
So Akira, even though it's almost 30 years old at this point, it still looks smooth.
Oh
It
yeah.
still looks next level. And it was a flop. It was a failure in Japan. It was
Oh, I
they
didn't
went
realize that.
way over budget. It was not what they thought it was going to be. But now it's, I mean, I think it's in the Criterion collection and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's gonna go down as one of the greatest animated movies ever.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be honest, it's not my favorite. I think it's okay. I do like it. I can appreciate it. The manga though, and again, kind of going back to what I said about that character arc and stuff that they focus so much on, that's not what Atomo does. Atomo tells these stories, and I think that's why it works so well for a Western audience, because it's not really like a manga sort of pace. And it's a 3,000 page series. It's 6 books or whatever, but at no point do you feel like you're getting that oh my god, he's just going on and on about this. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm rereading it. I'm book 4 right now, and I every time I sit down and start reading it, I'm sucked right back in. There might be a lot of dialogue, but it's a good mix of
Hmm.
dialogue and art. And the art is amazing. He has this realistic slash cartoony style. I
Yeah.
almost don't know how to describe it. It's like it's it's so believable the way it's done.
Yeah.
And he makes it look easy.
And that
And
and that's the key, making it look easy, making it believable,
yeah.
and that just adds to the impression of realism.
Yeah. And I hope, I mean, that's the thing. I think I would love to get more of his stuff. It's not widely available in English at all. I do have Domu, which was what he did before. It's way out of print. It's really hard to find. I bought it when it came out from Dark Horse, and I'm lucky to still have it.
Yeah.
If you can find Domu, which is kind of considered his Akira prequel, I would get it. It's much shorter work, but it's a masterpiece. Everything this guy does is a masterpiece.
Nice.
And and I saw on Twitter the other day, the kind of finale of Akira takes place in this like stadium,
Right.
and someone had taken a screenshot and said, how did he draw this? And someone said he had assistants. This goes back to the assistants thing,
Right.
and to the guy's credit, he responded, yeah, how does fucking assistants draw it? Like it's still like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And for sure Atomo had assistants and stuff like that, but there's also not a doubt in my mind, looking at his earlier work, that he could have drawn that shit.
Mhm.
He just didn't have the time, and so he had Koichi doing it. But yeah, so those are my picks.
Nice.
I have more manga, but those are the ones that I think it's a mix of like well-known manga and stuff maybe like Koichi's work and Junko Mizuno's work that maybe you haven't heard of.
Right.
And I would definitely track those down, and especially if you're a cartoonist, studying this other subsect of our art form helps you become a better artist.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why I believe that the more that you kind of consume is not the right word, expose yourself to, and especially if you're coming at it from an analytical point, then the better off you're going to be.
Right.
When you create your own shit.
Absolutely. So all right, yeah. So
Awesome.
leave
Well,
in the comments what's your favorite manga. Let me know what I missed.
Yeah, and this is not meant to be an all-inclusive, authoritative
absolutely not
thing. This is Ryan giving me and anyone else out there who may not be as familiar, sort of a jumping off point to getting down to the nitty gritty of the manga art form.
Absolutely. All right, Levi, take us away.
All right, just do the damn thing.